felt yesterday a lot of resistance after the satsang, what you were talking about these life patterns. These patterns is a relationship. And in my head they were all coming this therapeutic stuff. Of course you can change this pattern. And in my mind was the whole time arguing with you, and I felt these, how do you call it, energetic pull, and the whole time. And then we went to the Arunachala, and then it dropped, went away, and then it came back. And in the night at 5 it started again. It's not true. Of course you can change the pattern. I can do something, she can do something, like that. And then suddenly I realized it's just that I really think that I have a life, and you tell me you don't have a life. And I don't want to hear that. But please tell me again.
Because if change is going to happen, it requires the thought or the energy to come up for that change to happen. And maybe there's a belief that you're creating that energy or that thought to come up to change that.
Yeah.
Where does that thought and that energy come from? Is there a you in there creating that thought? Or does it just suddenly appear and then action happens? Or not action happens?
Yeah, but there's such a strong belief that she can do something for me.
Yeah. And then, to say if you go to someone that you can see suffering and they never change anything, then the thought goes to they could do something if they wanted to, but they don't. But it requires that energy and that thought, and the question is, where does that energy and thought to change come from? Where is that coming from? And when it's seen that there's absolutely no little person in here or in here doing that it's coming from absolute empty space, then it's seen that nobody ever did anything. That who you thought you were was thoughts and sensations and energies appearing, giving the impression that there's somebody there doing. But it's terrible for the one that thinks, terrible, the one that thinks it's doing, but then also, in another way, it's absolute relief and the end of blame. Because then you can never blame, again, someone for not doing something. Because when it's seen that there's absolutely no one there creating these energies and thoughts, the programming, then there's no longer blame. And blame and guilt are the majority of suffering. That's the majority of the time what that contraction is. They could have done something different, I should have done something different, or expectation of how, or a situation, or you should have responded to a situation, should be. And when it's seen that all of it's coming from absolute empty space, from no one, then you see that there's no one that ever did anything wrong. The root, the source of all thoughts, all feelings come from absolute emptiness. And it's not that doing stops. So it's not then that, because I know you guys are masseuse, and I don't know that much about what you do. I have a little understanding. It's not that that's wrong, because you never did that either. So I think
we make a lot of therapeutic stuff too, and this was always my question. Why is there someone, sometimes they come for 10 sessions and someone comes one session and they change. They change and some of them come 20, 30 sessions
and they don't change.
And they don't change. And I always thought, why? I don't know. Where's this hint that change happens?
And it's because and this sounds so dry, but whether life decides that or not. But it's not that your massage or healing practice is useless in a way, because in the past you maybe thought that it was doing something.
Yeah.
But it's an absolute divine expression of oneness, now expressing itself in healing, in massage. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And then somebody come, and some people, maybe 60-70% of people go away, and that suffering part of their body has fallen away. But it was never because of the massage, it's because life is expressing itself in that way. So it's the end of, so it's not stop doing those massages or anything like that. It's the end of the belief that you're doing it. It's life doing it. And that's a beautiful expression. I love massage. Like I love acupuncture, and I don't so often go for it now. If I had more money, maybe there would be more going, but it's not to do with me, it's life. Because often people hear this message and they think I'm saying don't do, or everything you do is useless. It's that all that emphasis that was put, it's not that everything's useless, it's that the activity of the mind that's putting importance on everything falls away. That dynamic falls away. Because it is what it is, we don't know what's happening. We have such limited information, and the mind makes all these stories to try and make sense of it. And really what it's doing is trying to make safety and position and an idea of where and how it fits into the world when we don't know. We're just instruments of life playing out the role. And then the mind wants to make sense, to live in future and past, in the idea to really to create safety. And the idea that it can get something in the future, it can get more in the future. And then it just comes when all those ideas of importance of they're doing this or that, or they should be doing this, all these ideas fall away, you're just left experiencing. And that doesn't mean not doing. Doing still happens, but it's no longer believe that you're some little person in here creating those thoughts and those energies and impulses. They're seen as coming from life, and that little self falls into the ocean of what we are, like falls into back into God, or so many people say it in different ways and it's so hard to put it. And it's that little self, and the biggest drama that the little self, although I did like the word little self because it makes it sound like it's bad in some way, it's just as beautiful expression of God, no longer can claim anything and say I did this, she did that. And it's the end of blame, it's absolute love, because there's no longer they got this wrong, I got this wrong. That can only come with doership. It's absolute acceptance, and it's absolute acceptance because the resistance fell away. And as long as there's a doer there, there'll always be resistance, because you'll think you can do it better. But it's not that. Some people then say, so I'm absolutely meaningless, or this is absolutely meaningless because the mind can't fixate on a bigger picture in the future. It's not that. It's not that you're meaningless, it's that you just become experiencing without all these grand and big ideas, or these suffering ideas of I've done it wrong, I've got to get it better in the future, I messed this up. It's the end of that little self-importance, and you just become a beautiful expression of life just as you are, without that second jumping in and going, no, you could have done this better, no, you need to do this, you need to do that.
Without wanting something.
Yeah. I tend to use like craving, like more, or seeking, because then there's still preference arising. Like there'll still be a preference. Like if there's massage is enjoyed, then there'll be a preference doing this. Like I enjoy talking about this, so there's a preference or a like of talking about it, and a preference to a quiche as opposed to just raw vegetables. Well, I like raw vegetables too, but I'm trying to say there's still likes, like I like a cup of tea in the morning, but it's no longer that. I've got to have it for my happiness in the future, this idea of what the next moment's going to bring, and that comes with a doer. That idea of happiness in the future can only come with somebody who can get it. So it's the end of all self-identification. But it's seeing where that self comes from, where inside of you that comes from, that there's nothing there. There's nobody there. Like randomness, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Constantly questioning it. But then there's absolutely nothing wrong with going to Pune, but there's just no longer the belief in any of it. That it's going to give you something in the future. It is what it is. And then there might be change. It's more than likely if you go to a physical therapist, it's more than likely that improvement will happen rather than, going to somebody who's going to do karate with you every day or martial arts. Like, it's still the world's working in logic. If you've got a pain, and going to it's not that you stop going to the doctor, it's just that whole movement towards, I'm doing this, I'm getting this right, I can get this in the future that goes.
And when I am not doing it, getting it right, the person who comes to me is the same,
Yeah.
then what to do? And when I know that she can't get it right too.
But there's nothing wrong then, but it's then, if there's like a discussing of, say, emotions, I'm not sure exactly what you do, but say if there's like
a lot of emotional
yeah,
processes.
yeah. But it's like there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's just, before you used to do it for an outcome, now you're doing it because that's the impulse that God's put in you. So it's then, you're not saying to them, so say if they come to you and they're talking about their emotions, before there was maybe the idea in play that this will lead to something in the future. But you still might talk about it, but there's still more than likely talking about it and discussing of the emotions coming up. But there's no longer that belief in it. But it's not that it won't still happen. Because it's really hard to
Yeah, for me it was.
because I still talk about this, even though, like,
for me in the morning it came just to this point. What you were saying once. You don't have a life. Life is. And when you don't have these beliefs that I have a life, then just life is, and then everything is good.
but it doesn't mean that anything changes in this, like physically changes. It's just the drop into that idea. So the massage and the talking about emotions, like they're talking about this. I would say that I can't liberate you, but yet there is a talking about liberation, and it's just seen as God's will if that changes. So there's still the talking or the carrying of the job, but it's just coming from no longer from the place that you're doing anything. It's now just seen as that's the impulse and the words coming up, which are absolute perfection. Because then the mind says, okay, so I don't talk about this, or like this is useless, because the mind's always trying to find use. But the talking about it and the work carries on. But there's no longer that belief there. I'm doing this, I'm getting it wrong. It's seen as coming from emptiness. So here, there's still talking, one-on-one sessions in groups on the internet. But there's no longer, because the mind thinks I only do things because of outcome. There's no longer that belief there that this is going to be any outcome. It's just not thought about. There's no energy going there anymore. There's just talking about it because there's the urge to talk about it. And then if there's an outcome, then that's the outcome.